Berliners who almost daily shook their fists at the bombers, who, as often as not, sorrowed for family, relatives or friends lost in air raids or in the armed forces, now fervently spoke of the British and Americans, not as conquerors, but as liberators. This extraordinary reversal of attitude and this state of mind produced curious results. Maria Küchler refused to believe the Americans and the British would let Berlin fall into Russian hands. She was even determined to help the Western Allies. The grey-haired, 45-year-old housewife told friends she was ready to go out and fight to hold back the Red Army until the Amis or the British and Americans get here. Many Berliners fought down their fears by listening to BBC war broadcasts and noting each phase of the battles being fought on the crumbling Western Front, almost as though they were following the course of a victorious German army rushing to the relief of Berlin. In between the raids, Margaret Schwartz, an accountant, spent night after night with her neighbors, meticulously plotting the Anglo-American drive across Western Germany. Each mile gained seemed to her almost like another step towards liberation. Thousands were quite certain that the Americans would get to Berlin first. Their faith was almost childlike, vague and unclear. Frau Anne-Maria Hückel, whose husband was a doctor, began tearing up old Nazi flags to use as bandages for the great battle she was expecting on the day the Americans arrived. On the other hand, Biddy Jungmittag, a 41-year-old mother of 2 daughters, thought that all the talk about the Americans and British coming was, in her own words, just so much tripe. As the British-born wife of a German, she knew the Nazis only too well. Her husband, suspected of belonging to a German resistance group, had been executed 5 months before. The Nazis, she thought, would fight as fiercely against the Western Allies as against the Russians, and a glance at the map showed that the odds were against the Anglo-Americans getting to Berlin first. But the Red Army's impending arrival did not unduly alarm Biddy. They would not dare touch her, she thought. In her sensible English way, Biddy intended to show the first Russians she met her old British passport. But there were some people who felt that no passport and no document was necessary to protect them against the Russians. They not only expected the Russians, they longed to welcome them. That moment would be the fulfillment of a dream for which many groups of Germans had worked and schemed most of their lives. Hunted and harassed at every turn by the Gestapo and the criminal police, a few hardened cells had somehow survived. The German communists and their sympathizers waited eagerly for the saviors from the east. So you see, 2 groups of Berliners with 2 different ideologies were expecting 2 different kind of liberators from the east and the west. Hildegard and Eddie had lived together since 1939. They had existed underground in the Priors for almost 10 months. Hildegard was on the Nazi wanted list, but she had outwitted the Gestapo again and again. Her greatest problem, like that of other communists in the area, was food and water. To apply for ration cards would have meant instant disclosure and arrest. Luckily, Eddie, though a sympathizer, was not wanted as a communist and had weekly rations. But the meager allowance was hardly enough for one. Occasionally, the 2 women were able to supplement their diet by cautious buying on the black market, but the prices were exorbitant. Coffee alone cost from $100 to $200 per pound. Hildegard was preoccupied with 2 thoughts constantly: food and liberation by the Red Army. But waiting was hard, and simply surviving was growing more and more difficult by the month. On February 13, 1945, she wrote, "It is high time the Russians got here. The dogs haven't got me yet." February 18, no report since the 7th from Marshal Zhukov about Berlin front, and we are so desperately awaiting their arrival. Come, Tovarishti, the quicker you are here, the quicker the war will end. February 24, To Berlin today. Coffee from thermos. 1 piece of dry bread. 3 men looked at me suspiciously during the trip. So comforting to know that Eddie is beside me. Didn't get anything to eat anywhere. Eddie really took the trip to get cigarettes on the ration card she bought on the black market. 10 cigarettes were due on that. None in the store, so she took 5 cigars instead. She had hoped to barter a silk dress and 2 pairs of stockings for something edible. Nothing doing, no black market bread either. February 25, 3 cigars are gone. Still no communique from Zhukov. Nothing from Cornelius either. February 27. I'm getting nervous from all this waiting. It is catastrophic for someone anxious to work to be cooped up here. March 19. Wonderful meal at noon. Potatoes with salt. In the evening, potato pancakes fried in cod liver oil. Taste isn't so hot. Now, on the first day of spring, Hildegard was still waiting, and her diary noted, almost crazy for something to eat. There were no reports from the Russian front. All she could find to write down was that winds are sweeping winter from field and meadow, snowdrops are blooming, the sun is shining, and the air is warm. The usual air raids. Judging by the detonations, the planes are coming closer to us. And later, noting that the Western Allies were on the Rhine and could, by her reckoning, be in Berlin in 20 days, she bitterly recorded that Berliners would rather have the men from capitalistic countries. She hoped that the Russians would arrive quickly, that Zhukov would attack by Easter.